There is a silent, exhausting tragedy in the modern obsession with being unbreakable. We are taught from a very young age that mistakes are stains, that failure is a permanent mark on our record, and that the only way to be valuable is to present a surface that has never been scratched. You see it in the way people curate their online lives, hiding every insecurity. And you see it in the workplace, where admitting a struggle is often viewed as professional suicide. But 500 years ago, Japanese artisans developed a philosophy that completely inverts this logic, suggesting that the most valuable objects in the world are not the ones that are perfect, but the ones that have been broken and put back together. This philosophy suggests that we have been calculating human value entirely backward. We assume that damage reduces worth, but the history of art, and strangely enough, modern psychology, suggests the opposite. The technique is called Kintsugi. It is the art of repairing broken pottery with lacquer dusted with powdered gold, silver, or platinum. And when you understand the mindset behind this craft, it stops being about ceramics and starts being a blueprint for how to survive your own life. But before we get to the gold, we have to talk about the breakage, because you cannot understand the repair until you understand the pain that necessitates it. Consider the story of an architect named Liam. By all external metrics, Liam was the definition of success. His projects were featured in international design magazines, his firm was profitable, and he walked with the specific confidence of a man who had never really hit a wall. He spent 2 years developing what he believed was his masterpiece, a cultural center that would define the skyline of his city and cement his legacy. He poured his reputation, his savings, and his identity into this single design. When he walked into the city council meeting to present it, he didn't just think he would win, he felt it was inevitable. The presentation lasted 15 minutes. The rejection took less than 30 seconds. The council didn't just say no, they dismissed the core concept entirely. They told him it wasn't what they were looking for, and they moved on to the next item on the agenda. 2 years of work evaporated in the span of a breath. Liam went home and didn't leave his apartment for 3 days. It wasn't just disappointment. It was a complete structural collapse of his self-worth. When you build your entire identity around being the successful architect, failure doesn't just feel like a professional setback. It feels like a death. He did what almost everyone does in that situation. He went into hiding. He stopped answering emails. He ghosted his friends. He stopped posting on social media. He was terrified that if people saw the crack in his armor, they would realize there was nothing behind it. And this is where the risk quietly increases for most of us. We think the danger is the failure
itself, but the real danger is the energy we spend trying to pretend the failure never happened. Liam was trying to glue his reputation back together with silence. He wanted to wait until everyone forgot, until he could come back with a new win and pretend the cultural center never existed. But the crack was there. Every time he tried to open his design software, he froze. He couldn't draw a single line because every blank page reminded him of the rejection. He was paralyzed by the need to be perfect again immediately. It was his mother who intervened. She had been born in Japan and watched her son disintegrate for weeks. One afternoon, she walked into his living room, picked up his favorite ceramic teacup, a piece he had owned for years, and she did something that Liam gasped. She deliberately dropped it onto the hardwood floor. The sound of the porcelain shattering was sharp and final. Liam looked at the shards scattered across the floor and then looked at his mother as if she had lost her mind. He was angry. He asked her why she would destroy something he loved. She didn't apologize. She just looked at the debris and said, "Now, I am going to show you what to do with things that end." Over the next week, she taught him the physical process of Kintsugi. But she wasn't just teaching him a craft, she was deprogramming his perfectionism. She explained that in the West, when something breaks, we throw it away. We see it as waste. Or, if we do repair it, we try to make the repair invisible. We use clear glue. We paint over the cracks. We try to trick the eye into believing the object was never damaged. We lie about the history of the object. In the Kintsugi tradition, this is considered a lost opportunity. The goal is not to hide the damage, but to illuminate it. You mix the adhesive with pure gold dust. You trace the lines of the fracture so that the break becomes the most visible, brilliant part of the piece.
Liam sat there, hour after hour, fitting the jagged pieces of the cup back together. It was tedious work. It required patience he didn't think he had. But as he traced the veins of gold along the porcelain, a shift occurred in his thinking. He realized he wasn't just fixing a cup, he was looking at a physical map of trauma and recovery. His mother introduced him to the concept of Wabi-Sabi. It is a worldview centered on the acceptance of transience and imperfection. It teaches that nothing lasts, nothing is finished, and nothing is perfect. It suggests that beauty doesn't exist in the pristine, mass-produced object that looks exactly like a million others. Beauty exists in the wear, the tear, and the history of a thing. This is the part most people miss when they talk about resilience. We think resilience is about bouncing back to exactly who we were before the bad thing happened. We want to return to the factory settings. But Kintsugi argues that you can never go back to who you were before, and you shouldn't want to. The cup that Liam
Was holding, now laced with veins of gold, was no longer just a cup. It was something unique. It had a story. It was arguably more valuable now than it was when it was whole, because it had survived something. A psychologist at the University of Tokyo once noted that when we study people who have achieved long-term, sustainable success, we rarely find a straight line. We find a pattern of fracture and repair. The difference between the people who are destroyed by failure and the people who are defined by it is not the severity of the event. It is the story they tell themselves about the cracks. As Liam looked at the finished cup, glinting in the afternoon light, the metaphor finally landed. He had been trying to hide his failure with the cultural center. He had been trying to use clear glue on his career, hoping no one would notice the gap in his resume or the rejection on his record. He was treating his experience as trash to be discarded. But what if he treated it like gold? The realization was terrifying because it required him to do the one thing his professional instincts screamed against. It required him to be vulnerable. He looked at his rejected designs, months of work, the feedback, the embarrassing silence of that meeting. He realized that the rejection wasn't the end of the project, it was the raw material for something else. He made a decision that his colleagues would later call insane. Instead of burying the project, Liam decided to publish it. But he didn't publish it as a misunderstood masterpiece. He didn't write a caption blaming the city council for their lack of vision. He decided to publish the entire process, including the rejection, exposing the crack in his career to the entire world. He prepared a portfolio that didn't just show the glossy renders of what the building could have been. He included the harsh feedback. He included his own feelings of inadequacy. He highlighted the failure with the metaphorical gold of honesty. He was about to post it to his professional network, where thousands of potential clients and rivals could see it. His internal monologue screamed that this was a mistake, that clients buy confidence, not failure, that he was handing his competitors ammunition to say he wasn't good enough. That assumption sounds logical until you look closer at how human trust actually works. Liam hovered his finger over the post button. He was holding the Kintsugi cup in his other hand, tracing the gold line with his thumb. He understood the theory of Wabi-Sabi, but applying it to a ceramic bowl is very different from applying it to your livelihood. He took a breath, feeling the weight of the risk, and clicked post. What happened in the next 24 hours would not only save his career, but it would reveal a fundamental truth about human psychology that most of us spend our entire lives ignoring. He expected silence, or perhaps polite pity. He expected to lose status. Instead, the phone started ringing.
And the people on the other end of the line weren't asking about his successes. They were asking about the gold in his cracks. The notification on his screen was from a developer he had been trying to reach for 3 years. This was a man who managed budgets in the hundreds of millions, the kind of client who usually only spoke to architects through layers of assistants. But the message was direct, and it was short. It said, "I saw your post about the cultural center. Can you be in my office tomorrow at 9 a.m.? Liam went into that meeting expecting a lecture.
He thought perhaps the developer wanted to offer some patronizing advice, or maybe even scold him for airing dirty laundry in public. But when he sat down, the developer didn't pull out a portfolio of successes. He pulled up Liam's post on a large screen. He pointed to the rejection letter Liam had shared and said, "I receive 50 portfolios a week. They are all glossy, they are all perfect, and I don't believe a single one of them. Everyone shows me the buildings that stood up. You are the first person to show me what happened when a building fell down." The developer leaned forward and delivered a truth that rewrites the rules of professional survival. He said, "I don't hire architects for when things go right. Anyone can design a pretty building when the budget is unlimited and the zoning board is happy. I hire people for when things go wrong. And by posting this, you just proved to me that you can survive a disaster without lying about it." That assumption sounds logical, that we should hide our flaws to appear competent, until you look closer at how trust is actually manufactured in the human brain. We don't trust perfection. We tolerate perfection, but we suspect it. We know instinctively that life is messy and chaotic. When we meet someone who presents a facade of absolute flawlessness, our subconscious registers it as a threat. We wonder what they are hiding. We wonder when the other shoe will drop. But when someone exposes a crack, and more importantly, shows the gold they used to repair it, our biological alarm systems turn off. We see them as safe because they are congruent with reality. This is the paradox of vulnerability. By exposing the places where you are weak, you demonstrate the strength it took to survive the break. Liam got the job. It was the biggest contract of his career. But the real shift wasn't financial, it was internal. He stopped looking at the rejected cultural center as a shameful secret and started seeing it as his gold. He went back to the drawing board, not to erase the mistakes, but to incorporate the lessons the rejection had taught him. He realized the city council had been right. The original design was arrogant. It was disconnected from the neighborhood. He redesigned it. He didn't patch it up, he transformed it. He used the gold of that harsh feedback to create something that wasn't just beautiful, but was resilient and community-focused. When he
Eventually built it, it won awards not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. But here is where the Kintsugi philosophy goes deeper than just career advice. If we stop at business, we miss the most profound application of this wisdom. Because you are not a building, you are a human being, and human beings break in ways that are far more painful than a rejected proposal. We break in relationships, we break in health, we lose people we love, we suffer the trails, and the instinct in those moments is almost always to cover the wound, to get over it, to return to normal as quickly as possible. We tell people, "I'm fine," even when we are shattered, because we are terrified that if we show the pieces, people will leave. But research into post-traumatic growth suggests something fascinating happens in the brain after a crisis. It's similar to how a bone heals. When a bone breaks and knits back together, the calcification at the fracture point often makes that specific section denser and stronger than the surrounding bone. The break becomes the strongest point in the skeletal structure. Psychologically, this happens too. When we navigate a crisis and come out the other side, we develop a cognitive flexibility that people who have never suffered simply do not have. We develop empathy. We develop perspective. We stop sweating the small stuff because we know what the big stuff actually looks like. This is the gold the Japanese masters were talking about. The gold isn't the trauma itself. There is nothing romantic about pain. The gold is the wisdom you extract from the pain. It is the humor you find in the darkness. It is the patience you learn when you have no other choice. However, and this is why the advice sounds right but can still be dangerous, Kintsugi is an active process. A broken bowl left on the floor is just sharp garbage. It cuts you. It stays broken. The magic isn't in the break. The magic is in the decision to mend it. You have to choose to pick up the brush. You have to choose to mix the lacquer. You have to choose to do the work of integration. There are people who break and never apply the gold. They stay bitter. They define themselves forever by the thing that hurt them. They leave the shards on the floor and point at them saying, "Look what the world did to me." That is not Kintsugi. That is just debris. Liam began to see this distinction everywhere. He started holding workshops, not on architecture, but on this philosophy of repair. He would hand people broken ceramics and ask them to fix them, but as they worked, he asked them to talk about the things in their lives they were trying to hide. One man,
a stern executive in his 50s, broke down while taping a plate together. He admitted he had been fired 10 years ago and had never told his children. He had pretended he resigned. He had been carrying the weight of that lie, that invisible repair, for a decade. It was exhausting him. As he painted the gold onto the plate,
He realized that by hiding the failure, he had deprived his children of a lesson in resilience. He had taught them that their father was perfect, which meant they had to be perfect too. By hiding his crack, he was creating cracks in them. That night, he went home and told them the truth. He showed them his gold. And for the first time in years, the distance between him and his family vanished. They didn't think less of him. They finally felt like they knew him. This is the ultimate freedom of the Kintsugi mindset. When you stop fearing the break, you stop living in defensive mode. Most people move through life trying desperately to avoid being dropped. They play it safe. They don't speak up. They don't love deeply because loving deeply carries the risk of a shattering heartbreak. They don't take the new job because they might fail. But once you know that you have the capacity to repair yourself, once you know that you have a supply of gold and the skill to use it, the fear of falling evaporates. You realize that even if you shatter, you will not end. You will just change. You will become more complex, more detailed, more historically rich. There is a concept in Japanese aesthetics that pairs with Kintsugi called mono no aware. It loosely translates to the pathos of things, or a sensitivity to the passing of time. It is the bittersweet understanding that everything is temporary. The bowl will break. The body will age. The career will end. In the West, we fight this. We use Botox to hide the lines on our faces. We use debt to hide the cracks in our finances. We use cynicism to hide the cracks in our hearts. We are at war with reality. Kintsugi proposes a peace treaty. It says, stop fighting the history of your own life. Liam eventually retired from architecture, but he kept that first cup his mother helped him fix. It sits on his desk, not as a trophy of success, but as a monument to the worst week of his life. He often tells young students that if they walked into a museum and saw two vases, one factory perfect, untouched, identical to thousands of others, and one that had been shattered into 20 pieces and painstakingly put back together with veins of pure platinum, telling the story of its own survival, which one would they want to look at? Which one has value? The answer is always the broken one. We are drawn to the survivor. So, look at your own life. Look at the things you are trying to hide. The business failure, the divorce, the diagnosis, the period of depression you don't talk about at parties. You are treating these things like stains, that they are your story. They are the only things that differentiate you from the mass-produced perfection that everyone else is trying to emulate. You have a choice today. You can keep sweeping the pieces under the rug, hoping no one notices the sharp edges, or you can go out, get the gold, and start the work of highlighting them. Because the world doesn't need another perfect person. We have enough
of those, and they are mostly pretending anyway. The world needs people who have fallen apart and put themselves back together, because those are the only people who know how to help the rest of us do the same. Imperfection doesn't make you weak. It makes you real. And in a world of artificiality, being real is the most powerful thing you can possibly be. Wear your gold. Let them see the cracks, because that is how the light gets in. And more importantly, that is how the light gets out.